Right, good morning everyone and welcome to another of the Teaching Academy's professional development sessions. Today's workshop is around preparing for the oncoming teaching session, that being 2026-60. This is a fairly wide-ranging workshop that we run each teaching session, and often it can tend to go down different rabbit holes if people have got particular problems that they want support with. But I will point out from the outset that we have a number of people in the meeting also that can help respond to particular queries that you might have. So I would encourage you to put questions, etc., into the chat as we go. You are more than welcome to put your hand up, etc., and I'll stop and we can engage with different things if you want to chat further on those. So most of the session we will be spending inside various tools that we use, predominantly Brightspace, but a couple of exceptions exist in there also. But just to give you a little bit of context, I will share this link to this Padlet board as well again into the chat so that you can follow that yourself on your own device if you want. Okay, so what do we cover in this session? Well, that's very small. We're going to be having a look at some tools like the subject delivery guide, a subject outline tool, how that actually works within your session sites if you're not across that. I talk very briefly about the relationship between master subject sites and session subject sites because it crops up every session, because we're now at a very particular point in preparing for the teaching session. We're at week -2, and that means that we've moved from dealing with things preparation-wise previously in the master subject site to now being within our teaching sites, the session subject site. And that can sometimes cause some confusion about making changes where they need to be made and the impact that's going to have later on in needing to update both of those sites. We look through assignment portals and setting those up, gradebook columns, setting those up so that they're fit for purpose, particularly for those of you wrapping up session 30 and wondering why you might be having trouble with grade transfer, etc. We can avoid a lot of those problems by setting up our gradebooks now in a fairly succinct way. We'll look very briefly at quiz setups and their relationship through to the gradebook, discussion boards, looking at communication strategies, etc., with your announcements and what have you, as well as some of the other comms tools that are available. And groups, usually setting up groups around markers, for example, is a question that arises at this point also. If there are other particular areas that you'd also like to dip into, by all means drop them into the chat and I will give it a crack, as they say. So let's begin. And we're going to have a look at the subject delivery guide. I'm not going to be reading from this deck. It's more just to give me an idea that I'm not going too off track. So let me get that off the screen. And on the Padlet board, the title slide there for the subject delivery guide is actually a hyperlink which will take you to this resource. We remind people periodically about the subject delivery guide. Tends to drop off the map for academics after a while, but it is a very, very comprehensive resource if you're looking for everything that you possibly could be thinking about in getting ready for a teaching session and when it's going to happen. And what you'll notice is not only does it provide the dates underneath, but you can dip into particular teaching sessions. So I'm going to go into 60 and it will then download all of the items associated with getting ready for session 60 as an Outlook object. So you can actually add all those reminders into your calendars if you're so inclined. But right now, as I mentioned, we are at week -2. So let's see what it tells us about week -2. For session 60, that kicked off on the 29th. That's good. We're on the Thursday now following that. Let's open this up. Says me. Things might be very slow this morning, which is not going to be useful for us at all. Am I right in thinking, V, that there's some kind of CSU website delay thing happening this morning? That I saw that in some chatter elsewhere. So maybe that's going to pull me up this morning.
Yeah, and it seems a little bit sporadic. Some things are working well and others aren't. If you want, oh, there you go.
Yeah, I think I just needed to do it twice. Second time was all good. All right, so things that you might want to be thinking about in week -2. Have you put together a welcome message as an announcement in your subject site, for example, that might include those things? Looking through setting up your assessments, and then it links off to a whole bunch of different support resources to do with those things. It talks about adding Turnitin, etc. You might be across all this stuff, but as I said, it is a very, very comprehensive list of things that you may want to be considering at this point. Going through your grade setup and grade books, these are all things we're going to talk about today. But as I said, if you look in the subject delivery guide, it will give you the listing of the items and all of the hyperlinks to all of the support resources against them. So it is an incredibly useful, comprehensive resource that you may or may not want to touch at all. That's completely up to you. All right, that's the subject delivery guide. Moving right along. Subject outlines. Inside Brightspace, when you first go into the learning management system, you're probably aware that the nav up the top here, the black area, has a link called Subject Outlines, which opens up the actual subject outline tool for conveners, etc., who've been preparing their outlines. They are now published as it's week -2, available to students and visible within your subject sites. But this is where we end up going to be able to create those in the first instance, clone them, modify them, etc. And for those of you needing to make changes to existing subject outlines, you would be doing so in here. And again, you're probably across all this already. If I was to put in subject code, we can see here that for this particular subject, AGS 100, we have all of the subject codes for all of the cohorts in here that have been published, made available to students. So if they were going to be modified, the convener would need to be coming in here and retracting it, making changes and having it resubmitted for QA, etc. The point being, you can access the subject outline tool from this base page to make those changes, as opposed to going into your individual subject sites. So if we pick on that same subject, AGS 100 here, which is now live for students, that's 2560, that's not much good to me. Let's find it for this session, AGS 100 for 60. Underneath my subject, we have our subject outline link there at the top. The students can access this as well. And from Monday this week, it now has a link to the different outlines that have been published, and the students and other staff in the site can access the published subject outline directly from here. So 2 different points of access for the subject outlines, one to do with modifying in the tool itself, the other one to access that information as students and staff once it's published. Again, pull me up if there's any particular questions you want to ask about these things. Otherwise, I'm going to move through them fairly quickly until we start getting into the building and the doing inside Brightspace. All right, let's talk a little bit about master and session sites. We'll keep going with this same example. AGS 100, if we put in that subject code in here again, has a master site that's only available to a very select group of people, usually the subject convener, the course director, and maybe the some of the subjects teams. And that's the M- site. We might open that in a new tab. This site, with the content and the assessment shells that have been set up, gets pushed out at week -4, so 2 weeks ago, every teaching session that the subject is run. They make a copy of everything in this site and they push it out. After that, we don't touch the master site again until we're preparing for the next teaching session. So any changes that need to be made to anything in here, content, assessment, communications, anything like that, needs to then be made inside the session subject site that you're using for teaching. Quite often we get people logging things saying, no, I've updated that. Why isn't it visible to the students in this site? It's usually because they've been making changes in the master, which is no longer going to be pushed out after week -4. So just be conscious when you're looking at the sites, check first that you're in the right site. So similarly, if you make changes during the teaching session to your session subject site, you've updated the content, you've made changes to an assessment, you've got things that you want to keep using moving forward the next time the subject is run, you are going to need to either yourself or log a job to get support with transferring those changes back to the master subject site. And that is usually a part of the Quasar sort of review cycle as we get towards the end of our teaching sessions, to make sure that those changes have been moved back into the master. All right, so that's maybe something to put into your calendars for week 12, week 14, etc. Maybe once you've finished with the content side of things, particularly for your subject, that you're just wanting to check to make sure that those changes have been moved back into the master, so that the next time the subject is run, they are pushed out automatically. So that is a word on the master subject sites. They're only really valuable to us up until the point where they get copied and pushed out into the new session subject site, our teaching site. Any other commentary there from anyone in here about master session subject sites, that relationship, or are we good to move on? I can see some nods. Okay, no problem. If you do have any questions, by all means, put them in the chat and I will pull myself up. Okay, initial communications. 4 weeks out is a lot. Absolutely, Cherie. There's a lot of room between then and obviously when teaching begins. But yeah, that cycle has basically been in place. You get 2 weeks. So week -4 and week -3, no student has access to the subject site. So it's kind of a window for you making changes in there to whatever's inside the content areas, etc. You can start on the assessment tweaking, things like that. And then at week -2, that's when students first get access to the site. And we usually see academics at that point starting to go through their content areas and then start hiding things, etc., that they don't want students to see inside the site, if there are any. Cherie, you've got a question.
I'm a newbie and I got caught out by this master site because previous universities there is the one site, and so then the next offering is made from the current site.
Yep.
So how, and because I'm a newbie, normally how far out do you get access to the master site for the upcoming semester so that you're not caught out, you've been continuously improving that master site ready for its next offering?
Your access to it should be indefinite as long as you've got access to it.
Yeah.
If you don't have access to it when you search, you can just send an email to your subjects team and say, I need to be added to the master site, but you can always access it once you've been added, right? So you basically would then be searching for that. If I look for this again, it's just going to always be available to you to make changes to if you need.
Yeah, no, that's good. It's a slightly different situation where you come in as a casual and then just getting the cycle that CSU uses. So all good. Now I know I won't fall for it again because I've done a lot of copying backwards and forwards.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, to be fair, we had that same sort of process happening before Brightspace. So we're now kind of 2.5 years in to using this LMS. And prior to that in Blackboard, we had a situation where we had a very long list of previous iterations of subjects, and yes, they would duplicate. And sometimes people would say, no, don't copy that one, copy one from 3 sessions ago. And essentially version control started to get very, very much out of hand. It was one of the kind of primary directives that the sort of the scoping team was getting together when we were going through how are we going to set up this relationship? How do we maintain a pristine version, so to speak? But of course, 2 years in, we have people making exactly the same point that you've made, saying, but I made all those changes in the site I was using last time. So those have to make their way back into the master. And I'm happy to talk with you about effective ways to do that at some point. If you want to catch up about it, by all means, just reach out.
Yeah, that'd be great, Lockie, because at the moment it's a very manual, cut and paste, frustrating process.
Oh, there's much better ways to do it than that. We can help you with that. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't seem to be able to export like I've had at other universities. I could export like things that I'd worked off and then import the package back in.
We can
But I don't
totally
seem to
do
have
that. But yeah, again, it's there are quick and easy ways to do it that mean that you don't have to do it sort of item by item as well. So yeah, I'm happy to have a look. We'll see how we go time-wise today. Otherwise, we can catch up.
Sounds good. I'll send you an email. Thanks, Lockie.
No problem at all. All right, let's talk a little bit about initial communications in your session subject site. This usually takes the form of announcements to the cohort. And as I mentioned before, your students have access to the site from week -2. They are in fact enrolled into the site at week -4. Now, because they're enrolled into the site, it means that you can in fact send announcements to them and they will get those emails that come from the announcements from week -4. So we get some very eager academics sometimes sending out welcome information to courses a month before teaching even begins. So that is available to you from that point. However, in the event that you're thinking about it now and wanting to set up your initial communications, you would be going into the site and creating a new announcement. And I might do that inside my training site rather than someone else's site before I upset some academics. You can create a new announcement from one of 2 locations. One of them is on your landing page from the announcements widget area. You'll see a drop down next to it and you can create a new announcement from there. That's one way. And the other way to do it would be to in fact go up to the communications menu and click on the announcements button, either or. Brightspace has multiple ways of accessing different tools inside the site, and that will take you to the announcement dashboard, which gives you a full listing of all announcements ever made inside this subject for this teaching session. So yours will probably be empty at this point, and then you can start creating announcements. They'll be stacked up there. So there is a difference between the announcement dashboard, which shows a full listing of announcements that have been made. As conveners, it will show you draft announcements, published announcements, archived announcements. Students will only see published announcements. That's the dashboard. But in fact, the tool itself that we were looking at on the homepage a moment ago, this one here, this is called a widget, and the announcement widget gives a condensed view of announcements. This is student facing really, for them to read through, and then after they've read it, they can then dismiss those messages. I don't need to look at it anymore on this particular page. It doesn't delete it. It just removes it from their view, from that condensed quick view. Every individual user has control over what they see in that announcement widget area. It is quite compressed, and if you click on the actual message itself, the title of it, it will open it up in the full screen view for yourself, for students, etc. So that's just a refresh on how the announcement tool displays and is available to students. When you are in fact making your announcements out to the students, you click on new announcement, populate your headline, etc., your content. The content area for your announcements has the Brightspace editor available, which means apart from sort of your basic formatting options, it also gives you access to the Brightspace insert stuff and quick link tools, which are pretty nifty, particularly quick link, because quick linking allows you to make direct links to parts of the subject site. So if you wanted to direct students to a particular piece of content, I could say this week you should be looking at this particular folder. Maybe it's a particular page inside it if you want to, or just the folder itself. Go to this spot. That'll do, and start with that page. And at that point, that becomes a part of the message and it will take the students directly to it if you need to. The quick link tool also allows you to point students directly to particular assessment areas, to particular discussion areas. It takes them directly to the part of the subject's learning materials that you want them to open up. Of course, we can expect them to navigate through the site and find these things themselves, but the quick link tool allows you to just go straight to it, and it is quite often used inside announcements. So once you've populated your content, by default it will go out straight away. If you don't want it to go out straight away, you can set a schedule schedule, date and time. I don't want students to get it until next Monday morning at 9 o'clock. Set a start date, put in the time that you want it to go out. And when they talk about end dates underneath, that's talking about visibility of the item to students. So maybe I want them to see it Monday, but then I want it to disappear for some reason a week later. I've never actually seen someone use an end date on an announcement, but that's not to say that use case might not exist. So I'm setting it for them to get it next Monday. You can add attachments to it. You can record audio or video of yourself, which will add it to the announcement. So if I desperately wanted the students to see my face, I could turn around and go, turn on record video. There's me. Make the recording. You get up to 30 minutes. I don't know that anyone's making a 30-minute video recording for students at the beginning of the session, but it could happen. Stop the recording, plays it back to you, and then add that to my announcement. Give it a title, LK Talking Thing, and add that to my announcement. And now on top of the text that I give them, they'll also get a video to watch or an audio recording if you're inclined to do that. But it is very easy to add audio and video content to your announcements. Then we get release conditions. And I'm going to talk about release conditions very briefly here because it is a way for us to restrict or target our communications, our content, or our assessment. So in the event that I wanted this announcement to only go to one particular group of students, I would need to create a release condition. The type of condition that I want here is I want it to look at the class list, who's enrolled and which section they're enrolled in. So I'm going to go class list, section enrollment, and then at that point we get to decide who gets this thing. So I only want this to go to Bathurst distance students, for example. And now I have a restricted communication, a targeted communication. So for those of you that are dealing with multi-cohort subjects and you have information that you only want to go to particular groups, you use your release conditions to do that. Then once you're ready with it and happy, test announcement. Whoops. I'm going to hit publish, remembering that it's not going to go out until that scheduled time that I set. Normally it would go out straight away, but I've set a delay for that. So announcements in Brightspace work by firstly displaying on the student's homepage inside that announcement widget that we were talking about, but also at the same time it comes out as an email directly to them as well. So they'll get the information from the announcement as an email outside of Brightspace. Any questions around announcements at all? Or are we good to keep going? Okay, I'll keep moving. Also on your homepage, you have a tool called the activity feed. So the activity feed essentially is a permanent or sticky post that you can put on your homepage for students to access. It's usually reserved for critical information that the students may want to have access to across the entire session. The difference between that and, say, an announcement widget, for example, is every time you make a new announcement, it pushes the previous one down the page, and students have the ability to dismiss this. It's not that important to me. Dismiss, and then they have to go looking for it somewhere else to find them. With the activity feed tool, it's stuck there. The students have no control over removing it, dismissing it, getting rid of it. So it means that you can add things like documents or other critical information, links, etc. onto your homepage, and it is persistently available to the students there. So there's a distinction to be made between announcements and the activity feed itself. It's quite a handy tool to use. When you create activity feed posts, you also have the ability to restrict those so that they're only visible to particular cohorts of students as well. So in the event that you've got a critical document or information that is only for Bathurst distance students for the entire session, you use the activity feed area to do that, to restrict it. So it's quite a handy tool, and it sits underneath your announcement and calendar widgets that sit on the homepage. I will point out for those of you unfamiliar with the subject calendar tool that it will pick up anything that you create in the subject site that has a due date condition. So that's usually assessments. They'll appear in here that have a due date. You'll see a dot in there against them, and then the students can get the full detail for those. In one of our test sites, for example, let's see if they've got anything living in the calendar just yet. There are some dots. And then if I want the detail for what those events are, you see them listed underneath. And it is in fact a Zoom meeting that the academic has created each week with a particular date condition next to it, so it appears in the calendar. So that's visible to you and to the students. They can then open those up and get the link to the meeting, etc., whatever other information has been created against that event. When there are assessments, it will take them into the assessment portal for that particular assessment as well. So the calendar tool in Brightspace is fully integrated with any other object in the site that has a due date condition. So it's quite handy and certainly a significant improvement on what we had available in Blackboard once upon a time. All right, let's move right along. I want to talk very, very briefly about discussion forums because people are generally in the process of setting them up at the moment. We access those by going to our communication menu, discussions. And what I want to point out is that our recommendation with discussion forum structure is that you're very clear around what this is going to look like to students. Because unless you're careful, the discussion forum tool in Brightspace can become a scrolling nightmare. Lots and lots and lots and lots of scrolling for students. The way that we avoid that is to make sure that we have a very concise forum structure, which means that we only create a couple of forums. I would recommend 3 maximum, and that you create everything at the topic level, which will live inside those forums. So an example would be your main subject forum, an assessment forum, and maybe a support forum. And then everything else within those you create at the topic level. Because otherwise you're going to end up with, this is only a new site, so it's going to be a bit smaller, a lot of scrolling going on. And if I open some previous subject sites, you would see that there are just pages and pages and pages of scrolling. Students just don't engage with it. That becomes increasingly problematic if you have assessments as well that are related to your discussion forums. So my advice in this space is a smaller number of forums and then create your topics underneath inside those forums. As many as you like, as diverse as you like, but just try and keep everything that's assessment related happening inside that one assessment forum rather than creating multiple forums for assessment 1, assessment 2, assessment 3. It just starts to get out of control very, very quickly. Minimum forums and then everything at the topic level. That is my advice around discussions. Okay, let's start talking about Zoom. While we're talking about comms and comms strategies, I mentioned before that academic had created online meetings already and they were visible in the calendar. Let's look at how that was done. We access Zoom by going into our communications menu and then online meeting Zoom. Once it loads, and it is a bit slow, certainly for me anyway, because I have access to a lot of stuff inside this tool. You'll get a generic message around AI stuff. This has all been disabled at CSU, so you can close this off and ignore that message. Right, the tabs in this tool that we need to worry about, upcoming meetings, any that you schedule, will be listed on this page along with their dates. They will have been added to the calendar as long as they have a date. If you create meetings in Zoom that don't have a date, that are just generic recurring meetings, they're not going to appear inside the calendar. So you need meetings that have a date that has been specified, as opposed to meetings that have no fixed date. All right, so the links are here for the students to be able to join those meetings. Only the person that created them, the host in the first instance, will be able to modify these meetings. But the students can join them from here. Once the meeting has passed, they will appear in the previous meetings tab. You'll then be able to access analytics around that meeting. If I actually look at this inside the training site, it might be better for you. Just give that a moment to load. Okay, previous meetings will appear inside this tab. You can also access meeting analytics around which students attended those meetings, and any recordings that have been made inside those meetings will appear under the Cloud Recordings tab, at which point you get to, as a student, you can open those up and then watch or download the audio, the video, and also the chat is generally available for you, for students as well. But you do have the discretion inside this tool to decide if you want the recordings available to students or not. By default, this button over here on the right, Publish All Recordings, will be turned on. So when the recordings are made, they'll just be available here to students automatically. But sometimes we have things we don't want available to students, at which point we can toggle Publish All, and then you get to decide individually, do I want this recording available to students or not? So you can do that individually, or you can just leave them all on and available. The process for creating our online meetings involves clicking on Schedule a New Meeting, and then we work through populating the details for those meetings that we work through in Zoom. So title, date, time, etc. There's that recurring option if you wanted to create your weekly online meetings or tutorials. Then we go through further customizing our options, including adding co-hosts, which is here underneath our advanced options at the bottom. If you wanted to add anyone else in here, they need to have signed into Zoom at some point at CSU, but if I was going to be looking for, let's pick on Beck. It would then add her to the meeting as a co-host, and that would mean that when the meeting happens, they would also get any of those email notifications for it as well. Any recordings afterwards, they would get a link to those. They would also be able to sign into the meeting as the host. So if you have any of your peers that need to be able to run these Zoom meetings, make sure you are adding them as a co-host. And then once you save it, it will bring up this summary of the meeting detail, including the ability for you to add it directly to your Outlook calendar from here as well. No, the co-host cannot modify the meeting details. Only the original creator can do that. Otherwise, you're logging a ticket with DIT to get someone with high-end access to go and modify things. Good question, V. All right, so that's our summary of the Zoom meeting details. Keep in mind, if you get lost inside this tool and you're not sure where you got up to, always look at the top left where they have these breadcrumbs which can take you back to your starting page. So I'm going to click on Course Meetings and it takes me back to that first view with your tabs. Otherwise, people quite often will just get out of there, go to another part of the site and then come back because they're not sure where they got up to. Okay, so that's setting up our online meetings, and in the Padlet board there's actually a YouTube video with me walking you through the entire process of setting up Zoom sessions and tutorials and things if you want to look at that in more detail. Let's talk assignments and assessments, always my favourite part. We're going to pick on AGS 100 a little bit today, so let's start by going back to the base page. And the first thing that I'm going to be doing is having a quick look at the subject outline for this subject, which I think I opened previously. Yes, I did. And the first thing I'm going to do here is look at the items that are available. There's 5 assessments. I'm going to take a snip so that I can have the relevant details available to me here, particularly names, due dates, etc. And I'll just move that over onto another screen. Now we're going to jump into our assessment area. That subject had 3 quizzes and 2 assessments, 2 assignments. So let's go into our assessment area and assignments. And I can see that the academic has set up the portals for assessments 1 and 4, which were the assignments. One is a report, one is an analysis. That sounds right there. And the message that a lot of you are going to be seeing coming in here is probably to do with Turnitin being available but not enabled. This is what happens when you set up your assignments in the master site. Even with Turnitin settings turned on, it is there, but it's not enabled. And all you need to do is click on this re-enable box. Yes, please. And that message will disappear forever. Okay, so Turnitin is on and available, and our view in the assignment portal as teaching staff is always helped by these icons that are next to the title that will tell us where the setup is up to. So we have a new one in this space from this session, and that is this first box with this grid, which tells me that there is a rubric available for this assignment and it has been connected. So great, there's a rubric in place. The ribbon tells me that it has been connected to the gradebook. So there's a column in the gradebook available. And the binoculars tell me that Turnitin is enabled as well. That's great. Compare it to this one down the bottom here that talks about an exam with our slash through that tells me that this is hidden from students. These are visible to students. All right, so the icons have given me at a glance a bit of an update on where the setup is up to. I can also see a due date has been put in place. So the setup for these assignments is actually pretty far progressed, which is excellent. But if I wanted to put those in place, I would be editing the assignment, drop down, edit the assignment, and then we can start populating that against the information that I got from the subject outline. So the title, the date, etc., the weighting. Those are the areas that I'm populating at this point. Weighting goes in, the gradebook, and then the due date being populated as well. As soon as you put a due date in here, it's going to go into that calendar on the subject page that we looked at as well. And by default, students will be sent an email reminder. I think it's 3 days before the assessment is due, but you can in fact adjust that if you need to. All right, that the task description has been populated. And then we start working through our customization of the assignment portal as well. For some of you, you may want to set a start date for when you want students to be able to start seeing this assessment information. You'll need to be doing that by setting a start date and an end date. Start date will mean when it becomes visible to students. You can set the date and the time. The end date means it will remove that visibility to the students altogether. So I'm not sure why you would want to remove the visibility of it. It usually applies with quizzes. When people want students to stop being able to see quizzes, etc., they'll set an end date. But for assignments, normally it's usually just the setting of a start date if you don't want them to be able to start seeing the submission portal straight away. Underneath our availability dates and conditions, we also have release conditions. And the same as with our announcements, this will allow us to restrict this assessment portal to particular cohorts of students if we need to. At that point, I could create a new release condition and say that I only want this assessment to be visible to a certain part of our class list and a particular cohort of students. So this is for those of you that are creating different submission portals for different cohorts of students. It is still done in different subjects. And for that to happen, you would be saying, refer to the class list, section enrollment, and I only want this portal to be available to this particular group of students. So you can limit and restrict submission portals the same way that we did with announcements. You can do the same with discussions, but you can do the same with content. I'm not going to be putting that in place for this academic because they are using what we call common portals, which means that all students submit in the same place. Rather than Wagga distant students over here, Wagga internal students over here, everyone's submitting in the same area, so they're not using release conditions. All right, those are our availability dates and conditions. Other customization that we do when we set up our assignment portals includes our submission and completion settings, which generally will involve deciding whether this is an individual or a group assignment, also whether or not you want them only to be submitting particular types of files, or potentially if it's an observation, for example, you would be changing the submission type. And also whether or not you want the students only to be able to submit one file or as many files as they need to. More often than not, this is set to unlimited by default, but this, in this particular instance, the academic has decided they only want the student to submit one file. Obviously that means they can't submit multiple different documents and files as a part of this process. It doesn't mean they can't resubmit. It means that each time they submit, they can only submit one file. All right, at this point, they've also turned on this option that says that the files they're submitting need to be compatible with Turnitin, which means Word, PowerPoint, PDF, and Excel. Those are the 4 file types that it is limited to. The other option, which would have done exactly the same thing, is this one called annotatable files. That means that you can mark up the file when you're doing your marking processes. And we do run other PD sessions around marking, etc. But this is the one that's usually chosen by most people by default, annotatable. But selecting compatible with Turnitin does exactly the same thing. All right, interestingly, the academic has chosen the option only the most recent submission file is kept, which sounds good in theory until the part where you start marking that most recent submission and your feedback is against it, and then the student submits again. The work that you've done on that most recent submission will then disappear because there is a new most recent submission. So I would in fact encourage you all to think closely about leaving all submissions are kept in here. Right? You can always see which one is the most recent, but if you choose that option, only the most recent is kept, your work will disappear if the student, even by accident, submits again after marking has commenced. So that is an important tip to remember. In the event that you would like to have an individual email notification every time a student submits an assignment, heaven forbid, you can in fact put your email address in here as well and you will be notified. Maybe if you have a very small cohort of students and you need to know, then by all means do that. Otherwise, leave that empty. Let me stop there for a moment. Veronica, anyone else in the room? Have I got any burning questions in the chat that I've glossed over or missed? Or any questions from anyone here that you'd like to ask while I'm talking about setting up assignment portals? If not, I shall continue. All right, so we've been talking about our submission and completion settings. I'm going to go into evaluation and feedback. The academic has created a rubric. They have attached it to this particular assignment. That's why we saw that little icon before. In the event that you haven't done that yet, you would be adding your rubric here. And hopefully you've created it or had the assistance from someone in DLT to create the rubric, and then you can attach it to this assessment. There are particular instances where you might want to attach multiple rubrics. You can do that in Brightspace. But by default, most people only want one in place to facilitate marking. Make sure your annotation tools are turned on so that you can mark up the student submissions when they come in. If this is not ticked, you're not going to be able to annotate the submissions. And then we go down to your Turnitin settings. I would be advising you to steer clear of selecting individual evaluators and publishers for your assessments. The default option that is in place in Brightspace when we create our assessments is that anyone in the teaching team can mark an assignment and can publish the assignment and publish the marking when it's finished. Usually that means your markers will save as draft and the convener will go through when the marking is finished and when they're ready to release all the marking to the students and publish all. But that relies on, obviously, that comms piece with you and the marking team saying, you guys save draft, I'm the one that hits publish. I'm advising you against using these options where you are restricting who can publish and who can save draft, because it does create more problems down the track. It can lead to locks and blocks that will require assistance for you to unlock things. Particularly in the event that someone goes missing or you need to add new markers in, or that mistakes have happened in that process. It just becomes a little bit unwieldy. So our preference is we have any of our teaching team markers, etc., able to mark and publish, rather than playing around with these select individual evaluators and publishers settings. It just creates problems later on. So leave those settings alone if you can. Then you need to turn on your Turnitin settings. Veronica, go ahead.
Sorry, can I just check with those
Yep.
settings? From memory, you can't change those once the first assessment has been submitted. Is that correct?
Once submissions begin, you can't change those settings. You're exactly right. It's not even once marking has begun. It's once the first student has submitted something in that box, it's then locked.
Yep.
So
Okay.
what we might do here, in fact, I'm going to hop out of these settings because the academic's done a great job of setting these up. I'll create a new one so that we can see what that setting looks like when we first create an assignment. Evaluation and feedback, and here you will see that it says evaluators has not been selected. This is what I'm saying. Leave it like this, because at that point it'll mean that anyone in the teaching team, markers, convener, etc., can do the marking, can publish without those locks being in place. Once someone clicks select evaluators, you're left with that setting that we just saw a minute ago where there were no settings in place. So it's best to leave that area alone. Okay, now in the event that you have created your assignment, but you need to connect it to columns in your gradebook, what I'm going to do here is actually unlink this one so I can show you this process.
Excuse me, Lachlan, just before you go on,
Sure,
Jane
Jane.
Kelly here. Hi, this is my subject, so that's why I'm asking.
Excellent.
How do I put that back if I want to? I've obviously done the wrong thing there. How do I actually turn off
This setting down here?
evaluators? Yeah.
Which is a very good question. What we may do is, in fact, after this, we'll duplicate this and create a fresh one with these settings where we can fix that option. Right, so I don't think I can modify it from here. What I can do though is copy it, which will allow me to fix those settings. So
I have to do that for all mine then. I think I've done that across 2 subjects. Anyway.
All right, so why don't we do that? So in this instance, I'm going to edit this and firstly just unlink it. Reset that to ungraded. Okay, so cancel this. Lachlan, stop cancelling things when you don't want to cancel them. Okay, save that. All right, now let's duplicate it. Copy the assignment. Now I get a copy. All right, so this is the one that we want to use. We're going to say it's worth 20%. We're going to say that we want to link it to a column that is in the gradebook. We do that by going here to link to existing, and now we get to find the item in our gradebook that it is for, and it is this one, Assessment 1, the Livestock Enterprise Report, which is worth 20, so that sounds about right. We hit OK, it is now linked, and the due date that was against that column has now been transferred to here as well, so that's good. Now we can go down to our evaluation settings. Same setting is there, damn it. Okay. I will come back to that, Jane. There is a fix for it.
Thanks.
All right, so we've just linked our column to our gradebook. And when we're ready, we can unhide this column for students and hit save and close. Notice when you do copy an assignment, which is down here at the bottom, can you notice that there's a difference in the icons that are available for these? The Turnitin icon has disappeared when you make a copy. You need to set it up again. Should have remembered that. Let's do that. Evaluation and feedback, turn on Turnitin, turn on Turnitin. Allow the students to get the reports, and we want the students to be able to resubmit. That's it for the Turnitin settings. Save and close, save and close. And now we'll see that those icons are the 3 that we wanted. I have one in there that I now need to get rid of. So we need to check the box next to the one I'm going to get rid of and go delete. And 1 is now down the bottom, so I need to reorder. Again, reordering is available here under More Actions, Reorder. And now I can move Assessment 1 up to the top. Okay, so 1 and 4 are there. Rubric, gradebook, Turnitin. All right, we'll leave those for the moment. This is probably an opportune time for us to talk a little bit about the gradebook. So let's do that. Under My Subject and My Grades, when you first go into Gradebook, it can be that first screen, the Enter Grades tab can be pretty overwhelming. There's a lot of information in there. So the best bet is to jump straight into the Manage Grades tab up the top, which gives us our top-down view of all of the columns that are in the gradebook, and we can see there's a whole bunch in here, and that is because it has created a column for every cohort and every assessment that's in the subject outline. So you had 2 cohorts in there, Jane, Wagga Distance, Wagga Internal, with 5 assessments. That means that when this subject outline is published, it automatically created 10 new columns in the gradebook, whether you wanted them or not. We've already created columns for these, or you've done that, and we don't actually need any of these ones that came from the subject outline. They're superfluous now. The other thing that we're looking for here, apart from the name of the items, is over here underneath Association, which tells us that the assessment portal has been linked to the gradebook column, so the grades can flow through from one to the other. So we need something in the Association column, and if there's nothing in there, as there is for all of these ones, it means we can get rid of them. So now what we're going to do to clean this up is go up to More Actions and Delete first. This is the opposite to the assessment area. You actually have to click Delete first. And now it will let us remove gradebook columns that we don't need to use. The ones that we have already associated, it won't let me select. They're grayed out. So I can't delete them by mistake. All of these ones that start with a cohort marker next to them are the ones that came from the subject outline, and we're going to get rid of all of those. Wagga, 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 Wagga. All of those we don't need, we're going to delete. And now we have far fewer columns to deal with. So we've got some quiz items for assessment 2 and 3 and 5. We've got 1 and 4 here. We've got our grade comments and admin override. So it needs reordering, obviously, to fix this up. And we can do that by going More Actions, Reorder. And now we can start changing it. The easy one to do really is our admin override. We want that to be in the final position in the gradebook. So we're going to put that down to position 9. And the grade comment usually we want right next to it. So that's going to be position 8. And then if we have a look at our numbers that we want, assessment 1 is currently in position 2. Then we'll want number 2 at position 3, assessment 3 at position 4, and then 5 will come in after this one. So that will be position 6. Save. And now we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the grade comment and the admin override. So that's all looking good. We've still got something to deal with here when it comes to the final exam, because we have 2 items currently, one in there which is an assignment for some reason, and the other one there which is an exam. Jane, is your final exam a quiz for the students to do? Is it using the quiz tool? I think it might be.
Yeah, they get it. It's through the exam portal, but yeah, it comes up there.
Excellent. So
From memory.
I'm thinking that this one here, this assignment, sorry, this one here, this one, assignment, is not the exam that we are in fact looking for. I think it's this one here, which is a quiz. Yeah.
I think so.
No worries.
Have a look.
Yeah, I mean, we can always add it back in, but let's remove that for the moment so we can fix up our numbering. So the one that was an assignment, not the quiz. Which one was the quiz, Lachlan? Hang on, go back. Quiz is the one that just says final exam. We want to keep that one. We want to get rid of the one that says end of session. All right, more action, delete. End of session. It's currently associated, so it won't let me. Let's fix that. I'm going to open up my assignments area. End of session exam, that one. What I'm going to do with this is just unassociated, which says not in the gradebook. And that will now let me come back into the gradebook area and remove that column. Sorry, final exam was the one. End of session, Lachlan, end of session. Delete. End of session is now selectable. We can get rid of that. Okay, so our gradebook's in the right order, but what you'll notice is that our final calculated grade currently says 165. This is a problem for us. It means we won't be able to do the grade transfer at the end of session because this number needs to read 100. Why does it say 165? Because the final exam at the moment says that it's out of 100 rather than out of 35. So when the exams team goes through and modifies that quiz for you, Jane, to set this up, even though it might be scored out of 100, the weighting for the task is only 35, right? So we can fix that here. We're going to do that by editing this column and saying that this task is worth 35, not 100. Save and close, save and close. And now our final calculated grade total is 100. So that's probably a good segue at that point, after I'm sure that everyone's across that idea that you need to have just your associated assessment columns in here. All of those superfluous ones which came from the subject outline we've removed, and that you want your grade comment, admin override columns where they need to be at the end, and your final calculated grade tallying to 100. Now when you go back to your enter grades view, you will see, let's zoom out a little bit. You'll see that you've got your columns in order: assessment 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, grade comment, admin override. So everything that you need there for your marking is now in position. The one thing that I might suggest that you might like to do, because there's a lot of scrolling and things involved, is that you might like to make this a lot more kind of friendly for you to look at with your marking by giving your columns a short name. The width of the columns is determined by the length of the title that you're looking at. Doesn't impact students. This is all about your use of this. And you can actually fix that by going into the Manage Grades area. And what we can do is use this bulk edit option, which is pretty nifty. So I'm going to select all and then bulk edit, at which point you can change a lot of the different settings in your gradebook columns, but the one I'm interested in here is the short name. And a short name is only visible to you, not to students. So at that point I could turn around and go, A1 is a report, A2 is a quiz, A3 is also a quiz, A4 is an analysis, and A5 is an exam, right? Those are the short names. Once I put those in place and go back to my enter grades view, we can now see all 5 of those columns for our assessments nice and concise. Students don't see that, but it makes your use of this tool a lot easier and a lot less scrolling involved. So put in short names is the long and short of that. Now, Jane, did I see you had another question in there?
Just wondering if we should hide the columns, or are they already hidden? the
Okay,
student?
that's an excellent question. The best way that we check on that status is to go back to that manage grades view, that top down. And if they are hidden, you're going to see this icon next to the titles. So at the moment, those assessment columns are visible to students when they go to My Grades. So it's up to you. I know a lot of academics leave assessment columns completely hidden until publishing is done. And that's fine, as long as you remember that you have to go in and unhide them later. So we can totally do that. And I think you can do that in the bulk edit tool as well. So if we go back to bulk edit, pardon me. Visible, visible, visible. No, not hidden, not available here. All right, so what we need to do then is do it individually. So we can go assessment 1, hide from users. And you go through and do that for each of the items. You'll see that that icon's there, the column is now hidden. Right, so go through and do that individually for each of the 5 if you want them hidden from students.
I'm okay to have them open. I just didn't know if we should or not. That's all. If it's up to us, that's probably just leave it. Yeah. Don't forget.
Everybody has a different take on that. Sometimes people are doing things with it and they really don't want anything visible to students until they've gone through the whole process, or maybe it's a further kind of safety mechanism in case you publish by accident or something, but to be honest, it's completely discretionary. All right, as is always the case with these sessions, I've gone over time talking about particular areas, and I'm perfectly happy for that to be the case, particularly in setting up. Let's see all of the areas that I didn't get to talking about today before I finish. We were talking about assignment portals and finalising those. Quiz setups we didn't really get to today. However, the principle is the same as our assignment portals. Look at the icons that are next to them to see whether or not it's been connected to your gradebook, whether there's a rubric connected to it. Keep in mind that you should always be previewing your quizzes to make sure that you know what the experience looks like for students before you actually make it available. I mentioned when we were talking about assignments as well, the difference between setting a due date and setting a start and an end date. The due date is the point after which it becomes late. The start and end date is the visibility of the portal to the student. Whether it's a quiz, whether it's an assignment, it's when it becomes visible or invisible, which is where we use end dates, is something that becomes more relevant when we're setting up quizzes. If you'd like assistance with setting up a quiz, by all means log a Sherwell ticket and you'll have someone from DLT help you with that process. But those are the main things to look out for when you are creating them, making sure that they're also linked to the relevant column in your gradebook. Gradebook column check. We just walked through gradebooks with Jane a minute ago with her columns. It's important that they're in the right order, potentially that you've put a short name in place, that they tally to 100, and that you've also deleted any superfluous columns that have come through from the subject outline tool. Now is the perfect time to do that because we're in week -2. The outlines have been published, but the students haven't started working within the site, etc. So it is the time to be doing that. Some people like to export their gradebook, at which point they have a spreadsheet version of it in place. That's less an issue for me. But if you're particularly worried about doing that, you do have the ability to export your gradebook so that you have an Excel copy of the gradebook available to you. All right, moving right along. We didn't look at setting up groups. I'm happy to hang around for a few minutes and walk through the process of setting up a marking group in the first instance for those of you that want to hang around to do that. But it will be in the recording for those of you that need to leave. So that's fine as well. But that'll be the last thing I actually kind of talk about before I turn the recording off for today. Otherwise, you're free to ask me whatever you want. Thanks, Cherie. Nice to see you. Okay, let's look at the process of setting up a marking group inside this site. When we set up groups inside Brightspace, we access them underneath the communication menu, down to groups. And in this case, we don't have any marking groups in place. We don't have any student-facing groups in place. But I'm going to go through the process of setting up what I would call a generic marker group structure that the academic for this subject, Jane is here with us, can use later on if she chooses to, or can get rid of as well. So in the groups tool, they have this lovely term category, which just means a set of groups. We used to call them a group set in Blackboard. Brightspace calls them a group category. So I'm going to set up a new category, and I'm going to call it marking groups. Maybe it's marking groups for a particular assessment. You can certainly do this process as many times as you want to, but I'm going to set it up in this instance as kind of a generic marking groups setup. Don't worry about description. It's not relevant for students at all. So unless you want other markers to read information in here about the group setup, you can leave the description. Probably the most important setting when you're creating groups is the enrollment type. And there are a few options to work through. First one there, a specific number of groups with no automatic enrollments. This is the one we're going to use today, and it means we're going to tell it how many groups to create, and then later on you'll be able to manually allocate students into those groups. It is the most basic type of setup normally, where you are manually putting students in. It's also the one that people probably do when they want to set up capacity. With marker capacity in mind. So this marker can do 30, this marker can do 20, this marker can do 100. And that's usually where a lot of academics, conveners, etc. are coming from when they create marking teams. So that's the one I'm going to choose. The other options we have are create groups of a particular capacity. So if I wanted to say, I want you to split up the entire cohort into groups of 10 or 5 or 4. That's what this one would do. It doesn't say no automatic enrollments, which means it's automatic enrollments. Next one we have is create a specific number of groups, and that is automatic enrollment. So that's going to say, I want 5 groups in place, split up the whole cohort evenly into those 5 groups. Then we have groups with a cap and the students enroll themselves. So students are able to join groups of up to 5, and once the group is full, they're not going to be able to join that group. Then we have a specific number of groups, and they can enroll themselves. So there's only 5 choices. You add yourself to whichever one you want. And then we have a combination of those, a specific number of groups with a capacity of X, and you enroll yourself. So there's only 5 groups, and they have a capacity of 5, and once they're full, that's it, they're full. And then lastly, we have a very specific option, which is single user member specific groups. And unless you know what you're doing with this one, I would advise you to steer clear. It is a very specific niche use case for group setup. And we don't really use it that much anymore. So you're welcome to talk to an ED or someone else about that particular instance. But for today, I'm going to go through the setup of a specific number of groups where we're going to manually enroll. Okay, let's say for argument's sake that you have 6 markers. Jane, feel free to shake your head and say, nah, that's not it, but you can always add more or remove later. That's up to you.
I think it's 5 actually.
Okay.
So far.
No worries. Let's say 5. Plus yourself or not including yourself?
1, 2, 3. Actually, not including myself, might be 6. Yeah, sorry. So 6.
Okay. Let's go 6.
Go 6, sorry. Yeah.
That's okay. The restrict enrollments option underneath would be in the event that you wanted, for example, to set up a group that was only relevant to a particular cohort of students. No, they don't need to be in place before the assessment is created, V. They can be created at any point and then applied as a filter later on. Yeah. Group prefix, really, it will be determined automatically when you create by the name of the category. But if you wanted them to be called something specific, like A1 marking or something at the beginning of the group name, you could put in a prefix, but I'm not going to bother with that. All right, do you want the name of the category and the description to be visible to members, a la students? Not really, so I'll probably leave that alone. Then you have the option of setting up additional tools for that group, which is things like, do you want them to have their own discussion areas? Do you want them to have shared locker spaces to share files? Or do you want to set up group assignments, etc. against them? I'm going to assume for the purpose of setting up a marking team that we don't want any of those things. So I'm just going to hit save. They're now being created in the background. It happens basically instantaneously. And here we have 6 groups that have been set up. And at this point now, we can start carving these up in terms of the names of these groups. So maybe, for example, we call the first one marker 1 as an example. You might want to have an initial next to that person's name, for example, and I might say, because I happen to know one of the markers, that in fact it is JK Lachlan, not KJ. And that's it. Hit save. And you'll see that it is in a list like that. And as you create each of the other ones, they'll be alphabetized. You can't actually change the order of these things. It's always going to be alphabetical. So unless you're specifically kind of gaming this, so it says A, B, C, D, E, etc., it'll be alphabetized. But if you go with that kind of format of marker 1, marker 2, marker 3, they'll be listed down the page in that same order. All right, so I'm assuming that you'll come in here and actually change the group names to affect your markers. Once the groups are in place, at the moment there are no students allocated. When you're ready to start allocating, however, you can select all like that in the top corner. Then we can go up and hit the drop down next to marking groups and enroll users. Once we hit enroll users, it brings up this lovely view for us, which is in fact a list of all the students in the subject and a list of the marking groups over on the right hand side. And you'll notice that it has a tally, a progressive tally of the numbers of students at the top, which means that if I start allocating students to those groups, like so, tick, 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 you'll see that number's going up. And so that means our capacity, we can keep tabs on up here. So if your marker 2, for example, can only do 20, once you see 20 at the top there, they're done. You don't need to allocate any more to that person. And then you would work across the rest of the list, etc. You can, in fact, also go through your search options here if you wanted to limit who it was that you were adding or who you were seeing. Can I suggest that you also untick this box that says not enrolled? It's probably not going to impact you, but later on after census and things, and you start seeing students that are dropping out, things like that, you probably only want to see the ones that are enrolled rather than the ones that are not enrolled. So you may want to uncheck that and hit the magnifying glass to apply the search change. And then you continue. Now at the moment, it's telling me that there's no one that's showing as enrolled. That's interesting. Does that mean you have no students in the subjects? I don't think so. Let's hop out of this.
There should be about like 220, I think, right, Jane?
Yeah, correct.
Excellent. So why did it do that? Let's go enroll users. Well, there they all are. So why was it doing that? I want you to, surely, tick means show me the ones that are enrolled, Lachlan, not unenrolled. How about save? No, save is going to actually just apply the change rather than apply the search filter. Search, no, it's really not. Well, they're all there. What about show me the ones that are not enrolled? Yeah. Fascinating. I have no clue why not enrolled shows me the ones that are enrolled.
Could it be, sorry, Lachlan.
That's okay.
Could it be that if you select not, or if you select enrolled, that's after you've selected them and enrolled them into a group, per se? Does that make sense?
Like it makes sense. You're thinking enrollment in groups rather than enrollment in the subject. So
yeah.
you may be absolutely on the money. At that point, I was going a little bit macro, enrolled in the subject as opposed to unenrolled, whereas just enrolled in a group. That is an excellent point. I think you're exactly right. And if that's the case, it also means that if you only want to look at kind of students that haven't been allocated yet, you would be looking at not enrolled and adding them in. The problem with that, of course, is that it kind of renders our tally moot, because at that point we know that we've already allocated some to marker 1, but I can't see that tally here at the top. So that means actually we need to leave all of this selected, because I need to know when marker 1 has 3 students already. When I'm when I'm figuring out my allocation, right? 30, 20, 50, whatever the case might be. If I'm filtering the search to only show me the ones that are not enrolled, for example, this number is going to go back to 0, which is no good to me. I need to see the cap, is what I'm getting at. Okay, so does that make sense, Jane?
It's great, thank you. I think I can fix it up. Danica and I can fix it up from here.
Excellent. And look, once you're ready to start using these, for example, in your marking, if you haven't used them before, you're in your assignment portals, you're looking at your submissions for the students that have submitted their reports. I don't want to look at all the students. I, in fact, want to only look at a particular group. We go groups. Marking groups is the one I want, and I only want to see Jane's students or whoever. And at that point, you apply the filter, or hit the word apply, Lachlan, up here, and it will narrow the list to the ones that have been allocated to that particular marker.
Yep.
All right, so that's it.
Perfect.
That's what I mean about later on, V. If you create the groups in advance, you then just apply the filter in the assignment whenever it's created. All right, so
Thank you.
that's
Awesome.
marker groups in a nutshell. I think what I'll do at that point, oh, my camera's been off this whole time. Good show. Okay, so I'm going to stop the recording. And as I said, I am happy to hang around if anyone has any other questions about things. But otherwise,